Hello, welcome back to the Anxious Love Coach podcast and the Anxious Love Coach YouTube. It's Natalie. It's nice to be back. Today's guest is the topic of boundaries. I am bringing boundaries to the table. I don't believe I've done an episode on this, and if I have, I haven't done it in quite this way. So I'm very excited to have boundaries here at the table. It's something I'm actually very passionate about behind the scenes. It's important to know both how to set and be on the receiving end of boundaries. The reason this topic is so near and dear to me, because in studying boundaries, and not just what boundaries are, but also studying what they aren't, there's a lot of things we have to study. We have to study multiple variables at the same time. We have to be able to, notice our inner experience in response to the outer experience of our environment, which includes the people we interact with and our relationships. But we have to also study the relationship we have with ourselves. We have to understand our feelings. We have to acknowledge and validate and appreciate our feelings and what they're trying to communicate to us. But just knowing those things is not enough. We have to use our information from the inside to convey to the outside. And so by default, when we're studying boundaries, we're not just studying mindfulness, which is what am I noticing in my body that's trying to get my attention, but also how do I use it and what meaning do I uncover from noticing myself, my inner experience, but also how do I communicate these things to the outer world? And not only that, but how do I communicate it in a way, not just communicate it in a really irresponsible, impulsive way, but how can I communicate my needs, my desires, my fears, my limits to people in a way that it's not only a gift for me, but it's also a gift to the people I communicate my needs and boundaries with. So in the context of relationship anxiety, of course, there are reasons why we might have anxiety in partnership. And I hope that, listening to my podcast, you don't only see me as like a relationship anxiety person, because that's just how you found me. You found me through relationship anxiety. But I study relationships in general, relationships to our health, our bodies, with other people. And so my content isn't just reserved to relationship anxiety. It's just like, that's how you found me. But I hope that there's a lot that I share here that can be useful for you in context beyond relationship anxiety. Maybe you don't really have relationship anxiety anymore. You don't have a lot of doubts in your relationship, but like you could still learn how to set boundaries. It's so important. But one of the things that can contribute to anxiety in partnership, which I don't think is necessarily like having anxiety in partnership doesn't mean you have a disorder. It means there's something that needs to be explored. But one of the things that can contribute to anxiety in partnership is a lack of knowing ourselves. And if we do know ourselves, we don't yet have the language to communicate. And so when we're studying boundaries, we have to talk about language as well. And because if we don't know how to communicate in a way that feels good to give, and as I said, good to receive, then our boundaries are going to have less likely going to land in a way that we would like them to. Now, I just want to add the disclaimer that sometimes, no matter how well you communicate, you could have taken my conscious communication course, you could have read Marshall Rosenberg's book called Nonviolent Communication. Maybe you took my Watch Your Language masterclass, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Maybe you've done all the communication courses. Maybe you have a communications degree and your communication is literally so impeccable, at least verbally. There's a whole other category of like nonverbal communication, but maybe your communication is so spot on. And sometimes it's still not enough. And what I mean by that is it still may not be received the way that you want it to. So just know that today I'm going to give you some tips in your communication that I can try to cover in a podcast, in addition to the giant topic of what the heck boundaries are and how do we set them and how do we make sure that we're not setting boundaries in a covertly manipulative way, which does happen. I see it all the time, especially in today's society. So enjoy. I'm really, really excited to have you here today. One of the reasons we might have anxiety in partnership, to kind of come back to that initial topic, is we might be actually dissatisfied with some dynamics in our partnership. A lot of us who come to anxious love coach, we're like, oh, I am 100% the problem. I'm wounded. I'm toxic. My partner's perfect. I just need to do the work within myself, and then my relationship will be fixed. It's like, honey, it takes two to tango. There's probably, an equal but opposite wounding present in your partner. And so a lot of these problems are not just you. There's often plenty that your partner is blind to the same extent that you're blind to yourself. In fact, that's part of the reason why you two might have found each other. There's almost like a little contract here to work out in some sense. There's a lot of room for interpretation around the word contract. But I believe that when we enter a partnership, we are not just coming here to meet each other's needs and make each other happy. No, we're here to actually become more conscious, become more aware, use the partner as a mirror to know ourselves better. And we can use our partners as feedback to show us where we're blind. From that lens, it's okay if we kind of lose feelings sometimes, or if we're not feeling super lovey. That's normal, okay? If we're looking to our partners to make us happy all the time, we're not looking to be awakened by our partners. We're not looking to how we find ourselves in the same patterns over and over and over, and questioning whether maybe we could be contributing to it. Not the entire cause of a dynamic, but owning our side of the street, okay? So part of your anxiety in partnership may be the fact that you are not yet willing to acknowledge that there is a piece of your relationship that is currently unsatisfying. Maybe there's some unconsciousness around it. We're doing something and we don't know why we're doing it, or we're doing something and we aren't even aware that we're doing it. The nice thing about having a walking mirror with our own traumas in partnership is we can start to see these things. We can start to be like, oh, wow, I am actively contributing to this dynamic that I say that I don't want, because there's a part of me that actually is getting something out of this, even if I find it unsatisfying on a very large scale. So we need to look at that. But one of the reasons we may be dissatisfied in certain dynamics in partnership is because we have not set a boundary. We have not laid down our own laws. And I will take time today to discern between what a boundary is and isn't, because I see a lot of confusion around this today. And I think a lot of the confusion is we're not feeling safe with our own no. We judge ourselves for having needs. We judge ourselves for having a no. And so we just say yes to everything, but not realizing that if there's a part of you that says no, the no will just show up. It's just going to show up in an unconscious way. I see this a lot where a lot of people pleasers have a lot of like body tension in their bodies, which makes sense. It's our body's way of saying no, enough. So even if you verbally say yes, your body may hold the boundary of a no. Say, I'm not going to give it to you all the way, or I'm not going to give it to you with my full consent. If we don't feel safe with our own no, we're going to judge it. We might say yes, but the no is still going to show up in some way or another. All right. So I hope that that's making sense so far. And I want to speak to the payoff that a lot of us people pleasers, I don't want to say us, because I don't even see myself as a people pleaser anymore. It's something I feel very comfortable with, mainly because I see boundaries as a gift I give other people. Can you imagine that? People pleasers, I want you to imagine a world where you feel like you are doing a favor to the other person when you set a boundary. Can you imagine? So I want you to imagine a reality where not only is setting a boundary not difficult for you to do, but you actually feel the love behind your boundary. You actually feel that your boundary is advantageous to the people that you set the boundaries towards. This is possible. It's possible for boundaries to not only not be painful, but to be very, very pleasurable. Okay. Does that mean that rejection is never painful? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that a context does exist where boundaries are a pleasurable experience for all involved. And that should, I hope that that excites you and frees you. Part of this is learning how to communicate boundaries in a way that does feel like a gift. And it doesn't even have to be manipulative. It's just when you start to be able to present just how much more beneficial it's going to be to the other party for you to set a boundary than it is for you to not set a boundary right now, your whole life freaking changes. So I don't consider myself a people pleaser anymore. Not too much. Does it happen ever? Yeah, of course, I'm human. But it can happen where your boundary is a very powerful experience. And the reason for that is this: if we don't trust our own ability to say no to things, then people are going to be robbed of the yumminess of an authentic yes from you. So, like I said, if you're saying yes to something, but there's a part of you inside that's like, no, I don't know why I said yes to that. And I don't even know how to self-correct. What about when I say yes, but then I want to backtrack? I can't even do that. Your person is getting, the person that you think that you're doing a service to is getting poisoned by your resentment because you wouldn't say no. That's not to make you shame yourself. It's just realize that you're not actually better than everyone. Your inner people pleaser is not actually pleasing people. Okay. The part of you that believes that when I please people, I am pleasing people. It's not true. You're not actually pleasing people because people feel your resentment. And it's not pleasurable. To please someone means to please them, give them pleasure. It's not actually pleasurable. People pleasures. You're not actually giving someone pleasure. You're not actually pleasing someone when you're people pleasing. It's actually, not to shame, not to blame. It's a trauma response. But in response to this, we can try to get our needs met by people pleasing rather than setting boundaries and saying, here's what I am willing to do, but I can go this far, but not this far. It can end up being manipulative. And a lot of people will hear me say the word manipulation and think that I mean that you're like a narcissist or something. While it can mean that, and I often think there's another conversation to be had around this, I don't actually see manipulation in and of itself as a negative, bad thing. It's something that we do when we don't believe we can get our needs met directly. Maybe we think if we set a boundary, if we say no, we're not going to be loved, we're not going to be accepted. And so rather than saying, hey, would you still love me if I said no to this? Because it wouldn't feel good for me to do this. That would be direct, right? Rather than trying to get our needs directly met for love and acceptance, we try to get it met in this indirect way. That is all manipulation is. Manipulation is not this horrible, terrible thing. And if you ever manipulate, you're a shitty person. It's not true. It's just there's some unconsciousness here. You don't believe it's possible to get your need for love and acceptance met directly, so you're trying to get it met in this indirect way. Maybe it's through people pleasing. It is manipulation in its own weird way. It doesn't mean you're a terrible person, but you have to examine why you believe that this is not something you deserve by getting met directly, okay? And like I said, when you are people pleasing, you're not actually giving the gift of your full authentic yes. You're giving a half-assed yes. So maybe I used to see this in my relationship all the time, where I would say, hey babe, I would say this to my partner Preston. I would say, hey babe, would you like to go to yoga with me tomorrow? And he would say, sure. Okay. Let's unpack this tiny little moment that actually used to fill me with rage, because here's how this would go down. He would say, sure. Okay. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, you're seeing my enactment of, like, I'm not even speaking for Preston. I'm speaking to a lot of men, a lot of people who are like, yeah, sure. Okay. Verbally, a yes was said. However, the body language, the facial expression was like, no, or at least I have some hesitations or reservations around that. But that was not said explicitly. It was almost like you were making that face or making that body, hoping that the person would read your body. But let's face it, a lot of society is not attuned enough to be able to read that. That's why I study this for a living. And so I'd say, great, I'll make a reservation. We'll go to yoga tomorrow. And you know what would happen? Two things would happen. Either he would go to yoga and have a miserable time, and I would have a miserable time watching his miserable face in the yoga class. Or at the last minute, something would come up. He'd get a headache, and I'd be like, what the heck? Okay. And I would be angry. I would be angry in both cases. And the reason I'd be upset is because what I actually wanted was Preston's enthusiastic yes. Now, he gave me his yes, but he didn't give me his enthusiasm. That's because, he was actually not a full yes. Now, it took years. Preston and I have been together 10 and a half years now. And fortunately, after a while, as I started becoming more attuned to first myself and also others, if he were like, sure, I would say, I hear you saying yes, but I'm reading some hesitation in your body language and in your tone and also in your facial expression. Is this an authentic yes for you? And what that would do is it would kind of shine a flashlight on his unconsciousness and put him in the position to have to own, yeah, I said I would go, but I'm actually really tired, but I really don't want to disappoint you. And I'm worried that that you'll be upset with me if I say no. And the truth is, maybe I would be upset with him if he said no. But he also needs to get comfortable with my upset. That's the other thing. So one thing that a lot of us people pleasers do is not only do a lot of us people pleasers have trouble with setting boundaries, we also often have trouble receiving people's boundaries, and we tend to project. So I assume, tell me if this has happened to you before, you're terrified of making requests to people because you assume that your request is too much, and so you set the boundary on their behalf. Or like, will you go to yoga with me? You don't have to, right? When we don't trust our own ability to say no, we assume that other people don't know how to say no either. And so we kind of don't even bother asking because we think that the other person's going to feel burdened into meeting our needs. And so we actually get anxiety around asking people things because we assume that they're going to feel as resentful as we feel. So when we start trusting our ability to set boundaries, we're going to start trusting other people's ability to set boundaries. And this starts to get really, really yummy, you guys, because you start to more enthusiastically meet people's needs, and they start feeling enthusiastic about meeting your needs. It also means that sometimes we don't meet each other's needs. So which brings me to this point, which is your yes is only as powerful and satisfying to the extent of your willingness to say no. I'm going to say that again. You might want to write this down. Your yes is only as meaningful as your willingness in any particular context to say no. So if I always say yes to everything, inevitably, I will drop the ball somewhere and a no is going to show up. It's just not going to show up from me. It's going to show up by life, a circumstance. I'm going to break my leg. I'm going to drop dead, exhausted. I'm going to snap at someone and have a rage explosion. My no will eventually come out through my body, through an illness, through a life circumstance, through me dropping the ball, AKA my unconsciousness. Some unconscious no is going to come out whether you like it or not. So you may as well say no when you see it in your body. It's like, or maybe it's not a full yes, but it's not a full no either. Maybe it's like, I'm willing to go this far, but not this far. All right. So when you don't know how to say no and everything becomes a yes, the no's are still in there. It's just, you wonder when the no is going to come. And you have less control over when the no is going to come. You have less control over when an illness is going to come up, or when you're going to drop dead, or when you're going to have a rage fit and you're going to explode. When you don't know how to say no, your yes becomes meaningless and diluted. So it actually benefits everybody when you learn to say no, or not to the extent you're asking, but I can meet you there halfway. All right. So I just had an episode just a few weeks ago, guys, with Betty Martin, and we talked about the art of giving and receiving. And this is a conversation we had in great detail. She also has a great book called The Art of Receiving and Giving. It's phenomenal. And I highly recommend you guys purchase that book. It might not be just a blank yes or no. It could be, I'm not willing to go to yoga at 7 o'clock, but I'm willing to go at 10 o'clock, right? Or I'm willing to go not to the hour and a half yoga class, but how about the 60-minute class? Or, I actually have a lot to do and I don't want to drive to the yoga studio. How about we take a walk instead? Okay. It's like the art of negotiating. It's not a blind yes or a blind no. It's like, okay, there's a lot of steps or a lot of pieces to, or like a lot of parts before we get to the initial request. And we also need to get comfortable with people's disappointment. Are you comfortable with your own disappointment? If someone says no to you, are you like, thanks for taking care of yourself. Good for you. Um, and I'm sure it'll, something else will happen in the future that we can do. If someone says no to you, are you genuinely happy for them that they're taking care of themselves? If you start to see that, you're going to assume that for other people as well, that people are going to be happy for you when you take care of yourself. This is something that is obviously easier said than done for a lot of people, but I want you to start to feel the safety inherent in saying no to things. So part of it might be explaining like, I see that you have that need and I want that for you. I want you to have that need met. I love you. I want you to feel good. But here's the thing. I have this need that, at least in the moment, seems like it's contradicting that. Like, you want to hang out tomorrow. You want to be with me. And I've been working all week and I could really just use a quiet night to myself. Man, we both want these two different things and two different ways to spend our nights tomorrow. How do we both get our needs met here? Right? So as opposed to I'm me versus you or my need versus your need, it's like, can I love your need as much as I love my own need? And are there instances where needs are incompatible at this moment, or even relationships are incompatible because you fundamentally need two opposite things in partnership? Yeah, that definitely does happen. There are more contexts than I can speak on in a podcast. So that's why it's important to be working with someone in a highly individual way, someone that can look at the full context of your situation and help you come to the right conclusions for yourself. So in a nutshell, not setting boundaries is not loving to the other person. It does not ensure the other person's going to like you. Quite the contrary. As a loving gesture to the other person, it is in everybody's best interests, including the person making the request, that you are well and happy. When you are well and happy, you're going to be more generous, which means that the things that you gift the other person are going to be coming without strings attached. You're going to be like, I am happy to help you. I have it. You have something that you need, and I have that to give. What a wonderful dynamic. What you need, I actually have in me to give, and I am happy to give it, as opposed to you have a need for something that I do not have. And that sucks. I would hate to pretend to give you that thing that I don't have. We're both going to be depleted now. Okay? So it is not loving to not set boundaries. It is extremely loving to set boundaries. Now, what I see a lot today, and I understand why this has come into a pattern, a lot of people pleasers, understandably, start getting full of rage and resentment. And so they are currently operating at a certain extreme where they say yes to everything, but their body is saying no, right? Or maybe their body is protesting, or their facial expressions are protesting, or their environment is protesting, so the boundary is getting set somehow. It's just not by your conscious self. Your unconscious part of you is setting the boundary. And that's why it seems like so all over the place and messy in your resentment. Your resentment is the boundary right there. That is your no. So if you are feeling resentment, I'm going to take Betty Martin's question here. Maybe it's hers, maybe it's someone else's, but what am I giving that I didn't say no to? You got to ask yourself that question. If I'm feeling resentful, what am I giving that I didn't say no to? What am I doing that I didn't say no to? So in response to the feeling of rage or resentment that we may have built up as a result of our unwillingness to set boundaries, I see this pattern a lot where people suddenly put up walls, really intense walls. And are there places for walls? Yes, absolutely. But I'm not speaking to the particular context um, of like where people are actively, deliberately trying to overstep your boundaries maliciously. Most of the time, you guys, people are just crossing a line in the sand that you didn't even draw. So if someone crossed a line in the sand that they couldn't see because you didn't put it there, you don't need to put up a giant fort in response. I see this all the freaking time, you guys. If you didn't draw a line in the sand and your rage has built up, and now you respond by putting up an entire fort, and now you say no to everything, well, now you're just moving from one extreme to the other. Now, maybe that's the natural progression of things, and we need to explore the extremes before we can find the middle. That's fine. Go ahead and put up your giant wall and then sit in your loneliness for a while, and then you're going to wonder, should I go back to being a people pleaser? No. It's like you becoming more wise and grounded happens as a result of learning self-trust in the moment. It's not like, are boundaries good or bad? It's like, no, it's like when and how and with whom and to what extent, and responding with appropriate boundaries in the moment, which requires a level of self-attunement, and B, the ability to verbally and non-verbally express our boundaries to the extent that they need to be there, and maybe not much more. So boundaries are not the same thing as walls. If someone, borrowed something without asking, we don't need to cut off the relationship or something like this. It might be enough to draw a line in the sand. Notice if all that's needed is a line in the sand. Most people will respond with, oh, okay, no problem. You also don't need to draw a line in the sand in a screaming way, like, would you please stop doing this? Okay, well, that anger may not actually be directed at the person. It may be directed at a parent or a sibling. It's important to make sure that we process a lot of our anger in our own spaces so that it doesn't land on a person in the freeway who cut you off and maybe didn't mean to. All right. So be processing your own emotions in your own spaces, but notice in your life that a line in the sand may be needed, and to deliver it without judgment or explanation. Sometimes an explanation is useful. The person might want to know why you're drawing it now and not before or whatever. And it can be loving to explain it, but just know of course, you don't have to. But sometimes it might feel nice to say, I know I said I could do this, but this thing came up and I'm so sorry. I have to change. I have to change this. If you ever do say yes to something and you want to backtrack, something that's worked really well for me is acknowledging that I did make a promise before. It's like, I know I said I would do this, but something has changed and now I can't do this anymore, or I can't do it in the way that I said that I could. So that will it's very honest, it's very loving, but it's loving to me and it's also loving to you. And that's why I really believe that boundaries are a gift, because we're acknowledging our needs as well as the other person's needs. So boundaries are not walls. Notice if your boundary is being established in an extent that's actually not necessary. Another thing that a boundary is not, boundaries are not punishments. It's not something we do hoping to get another person to change. If that is why we're setting a boundary, it's not going to get the other person to change. It's just a way to get the other person to feel really shamed, and shame never changes people. And the second reason is when we're setting a boundary trying to get the other person to change, it's actually not a very authentic boundary, and it's actually a very weak boundary, because we're not actually setting it for ourselves. We're setting it for the other person. And whenever we're setting a boundary for another person, it's going to be a weak boundary, because it's kind of like trying to eat healthier so that our partners will love us. It's like, it's not intrinsic. I'm trying to lose weight so that I can be good enough to whom? Society, right? Am I trying to eat better so that I'll feel like I'm enough? That's not loving to ourselves. We're changing for someone else. It's never going to stick. So it's the same for boundaries. If we're setting boundaries for or against someone else, it's really not about us. And if anyone pushes against that boundary, we're going to question it. We're going to waver because it wasn't actually never really about us. It was our way of trying to control somebody else. So if you're setting a boundary with the secret agenda of punishment, A, your boundary is not going to stick. You're going to waver if it gets pushed against. And B, it's going to do the opposite of what you think it will. People do not get a message because we set a boundary. People get the message because it benefits them to do so. Now, we can't control whether it lands that way or not. So that's why I say just set boundaries for yourself. And a metaphor I use with my clients often is a boundary is not like, it's not about the other person. It never is about the other person. It's always about you. So a boundary is like, let's say your friend is drunk and wants to drive you home. A boundary is not, I need you to stop drinking. A boundary is saying, I'm not getting in the car with you. It's that simple. A boundary doesn't ask the other person to change. It never does. It's just like, I'm not going to get in the car with you. So examine if you're using your boundary as a way to try to manipulate or change the other person or punish the other person. It's really just about you. It's not, I need you. Boundaries are not, I need you to do this. A boundary might say, are you willing to do this? No, that's cool. Okay, well, here's how I'm going to respond in response to your boundary, in response to your need. If I were to accept you as you are totally and not change you at all, here is what I'm going to do in response to that circumstance of you need this thing, or you need to be this way. I don't want to change you. If we're going to assume that the other person is not going to change, how are we going to respond to that? Right? So a boundary is not an ultimatum. It's not, I need you to do this. A boundary is not controlling the other person. Boundaries are not punishments. It's something we do for ourselves in response to actually accepting the person as they are. We can make requests. We can say, I would love for you to stop drinking. But if you don't, obviously this is an oversimplification, but that just is intended to illustrate my example very well. It's like, if I were to accept you as you are, here is how I will respond. Here is how I would take care of myself in response to you being who you are. And I'm going to assume that the way that you are is the way you need to be for you right at this moment. And I'm not going to try and take you out of that, because that would not be loving. Trying to change you is not loving. So I want you to be who you think you need to be. It's just that I'm going to do this in response for myself. All right. So boundaries are simply whether or not you are willing to participate in the particular context. So if we're setting a boundary, hoping the other person's going to change, that's not a boundary. That's a manipulation. So boundaries are inherently loving. Boundaries become loving when we truly, genuinely believe that our needs matter and that the other person's needs matter, and that you believe that it's in the best interests of everyone for your needs to be met. When your needs are met, you're going to be more loving, you're going to be more generous, and that's going to benefit everybody around you. I have said this to people before. I'm going to take a day off. I'm going to be a much better employee. I've said this actually before. It's like, I need to take a day off. It's going to benefit everybody much more if I am well rested. AKA, it's in all of your best interest that I take care of myself right now. And for that reason, boundaries are loving to others as well. So here's a few ways to, like a few communication tools. If you perceive that your boundary or need is incompatible with someone else's boundary or need, you might say something like, I'm perceiving that you have this need. Maybe they're not explicit. Maybe someone's not explicitly stating their need. AKA, you asked, will you go to yoga with me? And they were like, sure. Okay. You can hear that like, you said yes, but you sure don't sound like a yes. So you can say things like that. You can name what you're seeing. Like, hey, I'm having this perception. Is that perception accurate? I'm perceiving that you might have this need for autonomy over your time right now. Or I'm perceiving that maybe you don't want to go to yoga. Is there a part of you that doesn't want to go to yoga? Is that accurate? Or is something else the case? You might also say, I have this need. You might also say, I have this need and you have that need. And it might not be a need for the trash taken out. It might be a need for support. It might be a need for cleanliness. It might be a need for a break, right? So often the surface level thing that we think that we're needing is actually not the real need. Sometimes there's a need underneath it. I talk about this a lot in my conscious communication course, as well as in my Watch Your Language masterclass, both of which I have on my website. Um, and I think it's also important when we're trying to negotiate with our partners, if negotiation is possible, to acknowledge that you really care about the other person getting their needs met as well, which is like, I really have this need, but I also really want you to have your needs met. I really care about you. I want your need as much as I want my need. I want your need met as much as I want my need met. So I'm kind of at a loss. I'm not sure where to start with this or what to do. What do you think? And so now you've entered the conversation of the third option. Is there a nuanced third party solution here where both of us can think outside the box? It's like I said, maybe we don't do one or the other proposed initial solution to the extent that they are being suggested. Maybe there's something in the middle, or maybe there's something that's totally outside that. And it can be helpful to ask, like, what is it about this request? What is it about this thing that matters to you so much? It's like, what is it about you going, what is it about me going to yoga that matters to you so much? Is it you think I'm overweight and I need to work out? Is it that you want to do something spiritual with me? Is it that you want to is it that you want me to see you do yoga and be impressed by you? Like, what's the reason you want me to go to yoga? What is it about me going to yoga that's so important to you? For me, years ago, it was a combination of things. I wanted to have a more sensitivity in the relationship. I wanted more attunement. And so I was hoping that the mindfulness practice that we do together would create more attunement for the relationship. Well, that's a whole nother conversation. And we don't have to do yoga in order to become more attuned to one another. Also, it's possible that we had different priorities at this time. So there was a time when my priority was personal development because there was a lot of financial safety in my life. I was feeling inspired by these topics. Meanwhile, my partner was like working 6, 7 days a week at his family business and totally exhausted and just trying to stop working 7-day weeks. So of course, personal development is not going to be his top priority at that time. So had I had the foresight that I guess I have now, the insight that I have now, I would not be trying to pressure my partner to add another thing to his plate right now. I would be like, damn, you have a lot on your plate. Like, how can we get you out of a 7-day work week so that you can actually have the space to have a conversation about personal development where you would naturally be inspired to go into personal development? When you're in fight or flight, personal development is like not your priority. And if it is, it might even be a freaking trauma response. So it's worth pointing that out. Now I just want to kind of finish this topic by saying a boundary can be sometimes a boundary can be disengaging with someone entirely or ending the relationship. And I just want to emphasize that that's okay. If there are situations where you felt like that you had no choice but to do that, please don't shame yourself. It's also worth pointing out that if you went from setting no boundaries to cutting someone off, that might have been a way to avoid vulnerability. And it might not have, if you're finding this to be a pattern in your relationships, I can speak from experience that I have done this actively. And I regret it. It may be time to start setting more nuanced boundaries. And if you're not sure where to start, I love that book by Betty Martin, The Art of Receiving and Giving. Like, here's what I can do. Here's what I can't do. Would that work for you? And if not, let that be okay. Trust that there are lots of people who would enthusiastically be willing to meet this person's boundary or yours. Okay. So that is it on boundaries. If you are finding that, oh, by the way, I'm really excited about this. So I just launched something a couple days ago. I think it was yesterday, actually. I don't remember. Yesterday or the day before. Where I promised that I would be hosting a little workshop or series on how to stop comparing your relationship, specifically to maybe couples on social media or heck, in Hollywood movies or rom-coms or romance novels. If you have a tendency to compare and freak out when you think that you're getting the short end of the stick, I have something for you. If you're listening to this prior to Valentine's Day or even prior to February 8th, I'm actually going to be hosting a really sweet 1 week series. It's a 7 week little group chat called Stop Comparing Your Relationship in 7 Days. I'm hosting it over Telegram, which is really, really cute. So it's going to be a little challenge if you're willing to block off like 30 to 45, maybe 60 at most minutes per day for 1 week. I'm going to be sending out like these 10 to 20-minute audio clips via Telegram with a daily short, easy task designed to help you figure out what's going on underneath the surface of your incessant comparing, and B, some disciplines that I would like you to practice to kind of bring the hose off of your neighbor's lawn and back into your relationship, because the grass is not so much greener on the other side. It is greener where you water it. So I'm going to be giving you tools to get the weeds out of your garden, the giant things that are making your relationship kind of difficult, and kind of douse yourself with truth water instead of fantasy stuff, and also help you develop the discipline of focusing on what's right in front of you rather than what's ephemeral, what's not. Is it ephemeral or ephemeral? I don't even know anymore. I think it's ephemeral, but I'm not sure. That which is fleeting, the fantasy. So if you want to join right now, it's at an early bird rate of $35. It's probably going to go up. I'm not sure when yet though. So it's open to everyone. If you tend to compare your partner to other partners or compare your relationship to other relationships, I'm going to be supporting you for 7 days in a Telegram container. If you prefer to watch my little snippets in video format, they're going to be in my course platform called Teachable. So you can either watch a video every day on Teachable, or you can just be in the Telegram group where I'm going to take the audio clips from those videos and send them to you via Telegram. So every day you can get a little audio voice note from me that you can listen to in your car, and then complete the task that I have you do. It's going to be pretty simple, like put something on your calendar to do later, or a journal prompt, something I want you to uncover. And then what's really cool is you can take your completed task and let our group know and say, I did it, day 1 complete, la la, yoo-hoo, and like celebrate each other. I'm also going to open up the option to share in the Telegram what you've learned so that other people can support you. And this is really exciting because it's all happening right before Valentine's Day. So from February 8th to February 14th for literally $35. That's $5 a day to get support. And I find that this can hopefully, I want to use the word assuage. Is that the right word? I hope it's the right word. Assuage, bypass the comparison game that often happens right before Valentine's Day, where we all start comparing our relationships and thinking that we're doing something wrong. If you guys end up having pizza on Valentine's Day, I just want you to know that objectively speaking, that is okay. And many of us are doing the same thing. If you do nothing on Valentine's Day, that is okay. There's only okay for you. So I'm going to be offering like a lot of insights about romance and comparison. So if that's something you want to be a part of, it's going to be really intimate. I love the idea of having people sharing their insights in a Telegram group, like literally on my phone. So I'm very excited about it. It's $35. I'm intending for it to be a large group, of course. So that way we can kind of garner the momentum, the inertia of community and supporting each other and feeling really hyped up about our intention to bypass the relational anxieties that often come up around this holiday that I simultaneously love and roll my eyes at the same time. So, and what's really cool is I'm currently offering a little upsell. It's totally optional, but my Watch Your Language Masterclass is normally $47. As an upsell to Stop Comparing Your Relationship in 7 Days, it's currently $19. So it's like more than 50% off. If you've always wanted to get that masterclass, but like over half off, you can buy it in addition to the Stop Comparing Your Relationship 7-day series. If you are listening to this later, all of these snippets are going to also be available. So if you don't want to, if the time has passed, you can still do this 7-day series. You don't have to wait till Valentine's Day to realize that you have a comparison problem. These tools are going to apply anytime. It doesn't have to be right before Valentine's Day. You can do a 7-day challenge anytime and put comments into the Teachable platform. So don't worry about it if it's like past Valentine's Day. You can still do stop comparing your relationship in 7 days and get the full benefits from that. So that's it, everybody. I also want to let you know that I have 4 spots left in my 2 Austria retreats. I have a retreat with my teacher Steffi Price in Steiermark, Austria, at her home. And June has already sold out. I have 4 spots left in September. So I talked about it in my last podcast. There's more information in there. If you want the details and you missed the other podcast or you don't want to listen to the whole thing, just email me at natalie@anxiouslovecoach.com and I will send you all the details, like what it's about, pricing, location, all that stuff. So that's it, everybody. I hope you have a beautiful week. Thanks for tuning in today. And if this podcast landed for you or it's been helpful for you in any way, please feel free to shoot me an email or shoot me a DM. I'm kind of coming on Instagram here and there a little bit more. I think after taking some time away, I feel a lot more. It's a more enthusiastic yes because I owned my no, you guys. So I'm coming on Instagram a lot more enthusiastic now that I've taken some time away from it. So feel free to shoot me a DM. I may or may not see it. But if this podcast has landed for you, I would love to know. And now I'm off to a milonga to go do some Argentine tango tonight. Sending you lots of love. Thanks for being here, and I will speak to you very soon.